You got to zoom out, look at the big picture, and say, the Lord is guiding me here. The Lord's leading me. I trust in him. And each day is going to throw its own blessings and challenges. But once again, Lord, what are you doing here? Going to the Holy Land, it opens up the Bible for you. When you're on Mount of Transfiguration, instead of like on Mount Tabor, Jesus, went up with his disciples. It says, on this mountain, Jesus went up. So you're celebrating Mass and you're like, wow, it's so incarnational. It's like, I'm here. Mm-hmm. I've arrived.
Welcome to the Exposing Catholic Show, where we expose the lives, interactions, and stories of Catholics. Our guest today is Father Scott Goodfellow. Welcome on.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Heck yeah. So you're the pastor at St. Mary's in Chardon, one of the best priests in the diocese. Shout out.
And St. Patrick's in Thompson.
Oh, okay.
They gave me two.
Oh.
Yeah.
I knew that you went back and forth. I didn't realize that you were also.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, pastor there. Just
Heck
like here.
Yeah. Okay. Can we start with some strange ministry stories that you've experienced as a priest?
Heck yeah. So I was thinking about some stories before the episode today, and just thinking about I don't want to embarrass anybody, so but here's one fun one from I think I was only a year or two ordained. I'm about 10 years in right now, and when I was first ordained, I was at a Steubenville youth conference with our youth group, Saints Robert and William. And I remember there was a girl there during one of the Eucharistic holy hours. So they were doing the praise and worship music, and people are crying. They're in tears. Some of them are in tears. Some of them are exuberant with joy, hands raised. And if you've ever been to that, you kind of see like what that revival's like. Well, there was one girl, I was behind her, and I could tell she was like kind of visibly shaking, and you could tell she was crying from behind. And I thought she was being moved in some way. So I just I go up to her and I say, hey, is everything okay? And she goes, yeah, my heart hurts. And I said, well, just give it to Jesus. Give it to Jesus. And so I'm like, yeah, I'm proud of myself. I thought that was really good. I can help her to just whatever she's going through. So a couple minutes later, she kind of darts out of the auditorium. I follow her outside and I say, is everything okay? She goes, my heart, it hurts. And I realize she's talking about a physical, something with her heart. And so I said, oh, let's get you some help. So I took her to the clinic. Everything got sorted out. But I think one of the lessons that I learned was not to over-spiritualize when people say something.
That is funny. It's just like, oh, no, that's not what I meant at all.
Yeah,
like,
right.
I'm actually in pain.
Yeah. My heart hurts. I'm like, oh, yeah, it's just a spiritual thing, but...
Give it to Jesus.
Just give it to Jesus, right.
That's funny.
We've been doing spiritual direction for a while now, and I don't actually think I even know your vocation story. Maybe I've asked a couple questions about it, but I don't know like what it was like at the beginning and how you even got called to priesthood. So can we touch on those things? Definitely,
yeah. So I first heard a calling to the priesthood when I was a junior in high school, 17 years old, and I went on a retreat. That's really how it all began. One of my friends, my next door neighbor, invited me to go on this retreat called Christ and Others. It's at the Avon Retreat Center, the St. Joseph Retreat House. And there I met a bunch of other youth that were getting into their faith. I met a seminarian, and that was the first time I ever heard of a seminarian. I didn't realize that there were young men that wanted to become priests. So that experience just started to change how I looked at my own priests that I knew in my life. And it just started to open me up to this possibility that, wow, there's actually a call here for some guys. And I didn't yet make the connection that I might be one of those guys. But time went on, and I started to get more into my faith. I started inviting my friends to this retreat as well. So, a couple months later, a bunch of my friends attended, and a few of them started to fall in love with their faith. And I remember one of my friends, his name was Jimmy. He came on the retreat, and about a couple weeks after, he just started, he met that same seminarian, and he said, I want to be a priest. And so he's just very vocal about it. And I'm like, okay, like I feel that in my heart too, but I wasn't ready to like open up to friends or family about it. A couple weeks after that, Jimmy actually ended up passing away tragically and unexpectedly. So one of my best friends, so it really, marked my life. And after that point, I started praying more, just started really clinging to my relationship with God and with my friends from youth group. And I just started to pray more. And in that, I just heard the voice of the Lord speak to my heart at that time. Scott, I don't promise you a long life, but I will promise you a fulfilling life if you follow me. And that really just gave me that conviction that I really need to look into this priesthood thing. So over that summer, I started opening up to my family, some friends, and I told my parents, I'm like, I'm not really ready to tell people about this yet, so just kind of
keep it on the down low.
Keep it on the DL. But of course, my mom can't hold a secret in that long. So in about 48 hours, I think half of Avon Lake knew, which was fine. I mean, it was good for me because it took me out of my shell. And then I went through senior year. People, they called me the priest, and, I had to go through some of those gentle ribbings and things like that in high school. But it was a great choice entering into seminary right out of high school. Some of the best formations and friendships of my life were made there.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you made the decision junior year of high school that you're going to go into the seminary for sure?
I knew I needed to give it a try.
Okay.
So I struck up a conversation. I called the seminary vocation office. Father Bob Steck was the vocation director at the time. And I wasn't quite sure if I was going to go diocesan or if there was a religious order. So he gently encouraged me to join diocesan. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad I did. I really am glad I did because I got to be there at the seminary with all the guys studying for diocesan priesthood, stayed home in Cleveland, close to my family and friends. So it really helped me to develop as a young man. Mm-hmm. Right.
And then seminary life, what did that look like for you?
Yeah. So as you can talk about with any seminarian, that life is pretty structured, and discipline in the seminary. Contrary to maybe some common assumptions about seminary, we don't all walk around there with hands folded. And we're normal guys, right? Normal guys right out of high school. There's a collegiate, for undergraduate, and there's also a graduate seminary right there. But we take classes. Undergraduate, we'll do classes at John Carroll. That's where we get our degree from. And we'll do philosophy and religious studies classes at the seminary itself. There's time for prayer in our formation. Obviously, there's morning prayer, Mass, Eucharistic adoration, holy hours. There's formation sessions. And really, it looks at the four pillars of our formation: human, spiritual, intellectual, and pastoral. So if you look at those four pillars, you can kind of categorize things and say this, as a human formation piece, this is helping me to know, how does Christ want me to interact with other people? What's the right way of forming myself as a person, that I can be someone who would be attractive to talk to with others, not put offish, having the right qualities where he's like, I want to know that guy, right? Mm-hmm. Spiritual formation really looks at our relationship with the Lord and grounding ourselves in that relationship. Obviously, intellectual formation, you got to know the faith. You got to be smart about things, know the world, know life, and help people, lead them, teach them to be closer to God. And then the pastoral formation too, just entering into how do I serve others. Right.
We've got something special for all our Catholic organizations. Now, before you skip past this part, it's not an ad. It's more like an incredible opportunity to take your digital presence to the next level. And I'm going to let you in on a little secret here. Something only for our podcast listeners. We, DM Productions, have a 2-day Catholic social media makeover course. It's an online course specifically made for Catholic organizations. It will take your social media to the next level. And we make it easier than ever with our step-by-step video walkthroughs, cheat sheets, customizable templates, and more. Catholic organizations, let's start creating the quality and results that secular businesses have, but with the depth and beauty of Catholicism. Oh, and did I mention the price? $700. But remember I said I was going to let you in on a little secret? Use code DMPodcast to get it completely free. No credit card required. Just pop that code in and you're all set. Head over to www.dm.productions/social media makeover or click the link in the description. Now back to the show.
Yeah, you really, for me, I know that anytime like we have an issue or we need to talk to you about or just have a question about our faith, we're just like, why don't you just ask Father Scott? Like, he's got it.
Right. Yeah. I think some people would save themselves a lot of trouble if they just reached out to their priest and said, I don't know what to do here.
Yeah.
It's not about like solving the problem, but just kind of giving the next steps. And here are some considerations to think about, from a holistic standpoint.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very, very helpful.
Well,
would recommend.
Thank you. Happy to do it.
Now, we've heard kind of wide range of different things leading up to being ordained as a deacon and being ordained as a priest.
Mm-hmm.
Some from just like, oh, no, it was just normal, didn't really feel anything, just like, it just went how it was. We've been preparing for it for so long, all the way to like these visions and awesome, crazy stories. What did that look like for you?
Sure. Yeah. Oh, it's a great question. I think everyone's formation, their journey and story is going to be a little different. God speaks in the language of our hearts. So we're all going to hear him differently and relate to him a little bit differently. But the purpose of our formation is to relate to God in a truthful way, according to reality, how God really is. So our formation helps us to understand that. Who is God to me and who am I to him? For myself, that being said, I just knew, and the good advice when I first entered the seminary, just taking a lot of pressure off myself. Like, I'm sure you both can relate. Like when you're dating someone, you don't say, we're dating because we're definitely going to get married and there's no out. And I think that's what keeps some young men out of the seminary is they're like, well, once I'm in there, there's no escape.
Mm-hmm.
There's some
you're
black
signing
hole.
your life away.
Exactly. But that's not the case. And so the vocation director and the priests and seminarians that I talked with, they said, give it a year. If you like it, come back.
Mm-hmm.
If you feel it's not for you and you really feel that call of God, and it's not just something like, well, I'm afraid to give my life away or something like that, come back. And so I kept doing that. The seminary offers us a spiritual director that we talk with once a month, formation advisor, and so solid people in our life that we can really say, here's how I sense the Lord calling me, and here are some of my resistances to that. So you just take it year by year, and there's no commitment beyond that. Obviously, it's a seminary formation program, so the faculty will let you know how you're doing, what you can work on, what you're doing well, and things to work on next year if you decide to come back. So, and for listeners that might not know, it's about 9 years of formation coming out of high school, 4 years undergraduate, and then 5 years of theology.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And what about the leading up to ordination?
Right. Yeah. So for me, I think the big moment was, and the Lord spoke to me in subtle ways, and I just knew, like in my heart, I'm like, there's an attractiveness, there's a fittingness here, and I know I just needed to keep coming back. The moment for me that really solidified it, that said, I am meant to be a priest, I'm called to this, was my retreat that I did on my fourth theology. So year 8 out of 9. That's where I really knew I was convicted, done going back and forth. Am I called? Am I not called? On that retreat, I was reading through the Gospel of John, and I came to the passage from John 17:24, and it's Jesus, his final prayer to his disciples before he goes to his passion. So Jesus is talking to them, but he's also praying with the Father, and the disciples are listening. You can imagine hearing Jesus pray. So I put myself as one of the disciples listening to him. And John 17:24 says, Father, they are your gift to me. And that really spoke to my heart. Father, they are your gift to me. So I recognize that I am a gift of God from the Father to Jesus. So how does Jesus look at me? Not as a screw up, not as a burden or a problem, but as a gift. And then I realized too, if I'm being called to priesthood, God's calling me to look at everyone else as a gift as well. And if you want a difficult exercise, try going about your whole day saying, Father, thank you for this person who is your gift to me, or this situation, which I hate, which is your gift to me.
Such a gift.
Right. You're such a giver. No, but it
oh,
really...
you didn't have to.
Yeah,
it's okay.
Right. It transformed my whole vision. It helped me to see as God sees, and it confirmed me. I said, you know what? I I want to be a priest because I want to serve and see others this way. I want them to know that they're a gift. And so as a priest, I mean, that's, if you hear me preach for longer than a week, you're going to hear something about being a gift. So,
yeah, that's awesome. And when did you become pastor at St. Mary's? Was that you came here and then you were assigned that right away, or were you like a year transition?
Yeah. So usually when they assign a priest who has never been a pastor before, they do this in the Diocese of Cleveland. They might do it differently at other dioceses, but because priests are becoming pastors so early, like it used to be like after 16, 20, 30 years, you become a pastor. Now it's 4 to 6 years. So we don't have as much experience behind us. And two things. So administrator, not a pastor, it's easier to come in and also to come out of that. So if it's not a good fit for the parish or for you as a priest, it's easier to say, for the diocese and for the people, I was only here for a time and now I'm being, called to go elsewhere. As a pastor, there's a sense of permanence there, right? And so for pastors now it's 6 years, you're a pastor, and then after year 5, the diocese works with you. What's the next step? Or you want to, do another 6 years, you feel called elsewhere, enter that time of discernment together. You might have a pastor that's still here for, 12, 18, 24 more years, but you at least are thinking about that every 6 years, am I still remaining here? So administrator for about 1.5 years, and then December 2022, that's when I became pastor at St. Patrick's and St. Mary's.
Yeah, jeez. Yeah. I remember you first coming here and I was like, man, who's this young priest? They're like going to put him in charge. And I don't know. That's when my faith really started to deepen and blossom. It was during the time when you came here. You felt very relatable, and I don't know. It's like one of my first exposures to a young priest who's just like getting after it.
Sure.
It was a very, I don't know, welcoming and invitation to then like deepen my faith.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when we first started dating, one of our like first couple dates, I think it was our third date, we went to church at here, and Dom just couldn't stop saying, he's like, oh yeah, I love the priest here, like he's so great, like young, like energetic. And I was like,
oh wow.
Homilies,
cool.
knocking out of the park.
Yeah, exactly. So, and you guys weren't even close then. Now you've like built a relationship, and but even before that, he's like, it was just so intriguing for him, and
awesome.
he wanted to share
God
that with me too, which was really sweet.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's a blessing to to be here, and honestly, when you show up each day as a priest, you don't really. I mean, you do have agendas and meetings and stuff like that, but just open completely to the grace of God. When I came here, I didn't come with an agenda. I didn't say, here's where I want the parish in a couple of years. I mean, you start, and I held listening sessions, the first couple of months, and I wanted to hear from the people, like, tell me about the history. What is St. Mary's? What is St. Patrick's to you? Where do you want to go from here? What are some of your ideas? Are there things that have been tried and don't work? So I just try to come in with that listening and receptive attitude. And also, I mean, with boldness too, in terms of I know the gospel and I'm going to preach it. So yeah, not afraid of that.
What's it like being a pastor? Especially, so you're in the newer 4 to 6 year type of pastor. So what's it like being, I don't know, just like,
sure,
I don't want to say thrown in the deep end, but like you're in there pretty quick.
Oh, no. Yeah, you have those days. It does. So I've been, like I said, I've been a priest for almost 10 years. It'll be 10 years in May.
Congrats.
Thank you. So my first assignment, Saints Robert and William, I was parochial vicar, 3 years at St. Mary's in Hudson as parochial vicar. And then I came here to St. Mary's and St. Patrick's, administrator for 1.5 years. And it's been about 1.5 years as pastor as well. How is it? I would say, like, leading up to becoming a pastor, I had to do that discernment. Like, am I truly being called here? There was that sense of, I don't know if I can do this. You look at all the great pastors around you, as a priest, and you're like, man, I can't be like that guy. And one thing I realize is I'm not called to be like that guy.
Yeah.
I'm called to just be receptive, listening to the Lord. And if I really trust him and I'm following him, every step of the way, the Lord's not going to say, oh, oops, I forgot about you and I stopped leading you at this point. So no, the Lord's always guiding, always leading. And I show up every day with that sense of trust. One thing, I preach about, and I really try to live this way too, is in every situation say, Lord, what are you up to here? What are you doing with this situation or with this person? So that's really helpful. Like as a pastor, you're in charge not just of the faith formation, the liturgy of the people, but you got to think, everything about business administration. You got facilities, capital fundraising and projects. You got all the groups and ministries of the parish. You're working together with the diocese and with other pastors. There's collaboration. There's HR, hiring, firing. There's leading a school. So all of these things, it can be a little bit overwhelming if you look at it from the outside, and even from the inside. It's just there's so many little details. But you got to remember, you got to zoom out, look at the big picture, and say, the Lord is guiding me here. Lord's leading me. I trust in him. And each day is going to throw its own blessings and challenges. But once again, Lord, what are you doing here? So that helps me to zoom out, especially if there's an issue, there's a problem, there's a frustration that a parishioner, a staff member, or someone in the school has. Zoom out. What is the Lord doing here? Helps me to refocus and then enter it in the right way to really help the person.
Jeez. I don't know. That's just kind of overwhelming to hear.
Pastory 101. It's easy, guys.
Do they prepare you for that in seminary, or is that just like learn as you go kind of thing?
I feel like I'm going to throw the seminary under the bus. It's yes and no. They prepare you first and foremost to be a priest, a shepherd, spiritual physician. So that's the most important part. If the seminary tried to teach you business administration, we didn't get into the seminary. I didn't join the seminary to say, like, one day I want to be a good administrator at a parish, right? You said, no, I want to be a priest. I want to lead people to God. I want to celebrate Mass, do confessions, preach. That's the reason you get into it, right? So the seminary can't really teach those things in the time slot unless they added another 3 or 4 years to seminary formation. And honestly, when I was in seminary, I wouldn't have been interested in this stuff. You don't get interested in until you really are kind of thrown into it and be like, oh, I need to know some things. So there is continuing education that the diocese will offer to us. There's also, a lot of it's just by experience and talking with seasoned pastors. I have the pastors that I go to and say, hey, I came across this situation. How would you handle this? So, you have this web of solid priestly friendships and relationships, pastors that have been and done these things before. They've been here, done that, and you trust in the people around you.
Kind of learn from their mistakes.
That too, yeah. And what's worked well.
Yeah.
But yes, mistakes too.
How do you balance your time between all the different things you're doing and like pastor at 2 parishes? That's
sometimes it's like a juggling act, and sometimes it's just like that ball pit where you just start you're sinking in the ball pit. You're like, I'm supposed to be juggling all these things, but I can't. You gotta think too. It's like priesthood is not a job, it's a ministry. So it's not about getting things done. And for me, I tend to be type A. Like I want to finish things. I want to wrap things up, like organization, detail, like those things are just important to me. God made me that way. But one thing I realize in priesthood is that nothing's ever finished, right? So I can't close a relationship. That person I can help them along the next steps, be content, give that to God, go on to the next thing. But ultimately, that desire for, inbox zero, to get all the work done and just to be perfectly at rest and at peace, it's a pipe dream. You can't do it. And you're not supposed to either. So I think you got to look at what are your expectations and what's the reality and say, if the Lord is guiding me, he's going to give me the work that I need to do. He's going to give me the people in my life to do that work. And I'm going to trust in him and just continue to follow. And if I grow the best through the sufferings and the frustrations. And I think we all do. It's just something good to keep in mind. Everything is not just, puppies and rainbows as,
It's
as a
something you
priest.
hate to hear, but it's a hard truth.
Yeah, but I mean, that's life too.
Mhm.
I mean, whether you're a priest, deacon, a married, single, young parents, empty nester, like life is going to throw issues and dilemmas your way. And I think you got to handle it and process it with the Lord. So that's what I try to do.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How do you make sure that you're not slacking on prayer time with all the other things that you're juggling?
You just gotta calendar it. You gotta make time for it, and you gotta keep to it. I think a consistent and an honest prayer life with the Lord is the number one. It's the number one commitment that you have to make in your life.
Mhm.
Because if that starts to go, everything starts to unwind.
Mm-hmm.
If you lose that connection with God, you're going to lose the connection that you should be having with others and with all of life around you. So you just have to commit to it. And it takes practice. It takes time. And, you don't start by saying, I'm going to do an hour a day of prayer. If you're starting and you haven't even been praying for years, you start by saying, I'm going to do 5 or 10 minutes. And maybe I don't have, I want to shoot for an hour, but I know that's not reasonable. So today I'm going to do a half hour here and a half hour at night. You make it work, but staying in communion with the Lord it's key. You can't do
Mhm.
it without him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I definitely noticed, even especially in our lives, that when our prayer life is slacking, everything else is completely out of whack.
Yeah, it makes a difference.
So, and we're like, what's going on? What's wrong? The obvious answer is,
Right.
oh, you haven't been praying.
Yeah.
Like, let's get back on that.
How's my connection to God? How am I
Yeah.
doing with him?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And that usually solves it.
That's right.
And if not solves it, makes it so much better and way more manageable.
For
You
sure.
can't fix everything. Like, nobody's life is going to be perfect,
Mhm.
but prayer and a relationship with God is the best way to manage everything.
Yeah, definitely. I 100% agree.
What is it like to be, so you just become a pastor, and then now you have somebody underneath you that is in the same spot that you just were in. So you have a parochial vicar yourself.
Oh, congrats. You said that right.
Yeah. I was just going to say
Parochial vicar.
vicar.
Yeah.
But what is that like, and what are you teaching them? How are they
Sure.
kind of, just shout out Father Fabian. He's awesome.
Yeah, Father Fabian Hahn, he's my right-hand man here. So for anyone that doesn't know, a parochial vicar, it's basically an associate pastor. It's what I was at St. Robert and William, St. Mary's in Hudson. And in the pastor's absence, the parochial vicar has, similar or the same authorities delegated to him. But no, parochial vicars are just a godsend. Parochial vicar, so I'll say Father Fabian has, he's a newly ordained priest. So he was just ordained last May. He's coming up on his 1-year anniversary. And ministering to him and allowing him just to, I think for this first year, just to be a priest, like go through the schedule, go through Advent, Christmas, Lent, and Easter, and just to kind of like know what it's like. And, he's a godsend to me, first and foremost, because of his priestly ministry, helping me to fulfill the sacramental responsibilities, here at the parish. But also I think there's a real joy in giving myself and kind of looking back at like, how was my first year of priesthood? How were my first 4 years? And what did my pastor, Father John Betters, another shout out to a great priest, what did he do for me when I was newly ordained that helped me to fall in love with priesthood, the people of the parish, and just creating those opportunities for Father Fabian is what I'm trying to do.
Mm-hmm. So what are the things that, like, what's different from a pastor to him? Obviously, them not having all the control or being the pastor.
Oh, it's not about control. As pastor, you have to surrender all control. But I will say he gets to do all the fun things, and I have to do all the necessary things. So he'll get to play with the students here at the school, go out and play ball with them at recess. He gets to be in the classrooms a little bit more often. He gets to really be like just out on his feet. I give him a lot of the anointings. Someone is sick or dying at a nursing home or hospital. He really helps me. He's kind of the first go-to for that kind of stuff. For me, like the stuff I said, just the administration of the parish, meeting, planning, coordinating with staff, with different projects that we have going on. It's not glorious and it's not like fun to talk about, especially on a podcast, but it is necessary. I mean, you think about just all the stuff of home life. I mean, taking out the trash, doing dishes, laundry. It just takes time. You got to do it.
Yeah. It just needs to be
but you
done.
don't want to talk about it when you're like, hey, what did you do today? Oh, I did laundry. Like, okay, what else? Like, talk about the fun stuff. So, but it's all part of, pastoral leadership too, and serving in and through Christ. I just try to be Christ's presence as I do that.
Yeah, doing small things with great love.
Mother Teresa. Yeah, got it.
How have you grown your faith through pilgrimages?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, maybe it'll be helpful to start back at seminary. I did, so my junior year of Borromeo, the undergraduate seminary, we went with a John Carroll program to Rome. We did a study abroad for about 3.5 months. And so I went with 3 other seminarians and I think there were 15 or 16 John Carroll kids. First and foremost, just going to Rome and just experiencing another culture, language, taking classes there, and just traveling Europe on the weekends. It was so fun. Had some great, friendships and bonds that developed over that trip. And also it solidified my call to diocesan priesthood. I mentioned I wasn't sure at first if I was called to religious life or to be a parish priest, diocesan priest. And not ministering, but the John Carroll kids, when they saw us as seminarians, they saw us as guys that you could talk to about some of the things that you're going through. They trusted your opinion. They sought advice and counsel from you, and they saw you as a man of prayer. And so just being close to them and some of the issues that they were going through or that all of us together were going through, and just hanging out and developing that relationship really made me say, I want to enter into parish life. I want to be close to the heart of people. What are their issues, their problems that they're going through? So first and foremost, travel has a special place in my heart. And it doesn't necessarily have to be just a pilgrimage too. I mean, I like doing fun things. Bourbon Trail, I've been a couple times. Beach vacations, right? But I did do a pilgrimage to the Holy Land with Father Eric Garris and a young adult group as well that we took, or he took. I was just a participant, but 2017 to 2018, right after Christmas. And, going to the Holy Land, once again, it opens up the Bible for you. When you're on the Mount of Transfiguration and you're saying Mass as a priest, it says, instead of on Mount Tabor, Jesus, went up with his disciples, it says, on this mountain, Jesus went up. So you're celebrating Mass and you're like, wow, it's so incarnational. It's like, I'm here, I've arrived. So I was going to be taking another pilgrimage this fall to the Holy Land, bringing parishioners and going with Father John Betters. Due to the violence that is happening right now over in the Holy Land, we pray for everyone involved. We postponed that trip. Hopefully, we'll be able to take that next year. But this year, we're going to Greece and Turkey, footsteps of St. Paul. So I wanted to do something biblical instead of going back to the Holy Land. To do something New Testament oriented. So footsteps of St. Paul, going to Athens, Thessaloniki, Corinth, and just some of these great places where you read the letters of St. Paul. And you'll be able to see it and just understand. I'm hoping to break open St. Paul a little bit more as well. That'll help me to interpret him. Yeah.
Jeez, that sounds like so much fun.
Yeah. Yeah, you should come.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yep. I want you to get you to commit on the podcast.
Oh, there we go.
Oh my gosh. I mean, it is a little pricey. I'm not gonna lie.
I get you. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity.
There you go.
Yeah.
But with you just saying, like, on this mountain, like, Jesus actually walked up here instead of being like, oh, halfway across the country or halfway across the world on some mountain.
Yeah.
But you're there.
Right.
It's a whole nother experience, I bet.
It really is. And plus, there's certain things that you can pick up visually that you can't just by reading scripture.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, when you're on Mount Tabor, when you look out from the top of the mountain, you can see Nazareth. You can see Nazareth where Jesus grew up. So you think about this, where the place where Jesus grew up for his, for 30 years, he, just a normal human life. I mean, there was no miracles, there was nothing extraordinary about him. And then a stone's throw away, you have Mount Tabor, just a couple miles, and you can see Mount Tabor from Nazareth. This is where Jesus is glorified in front of his apostles. This is where he's transfigured. And you see, and you're given that hope that after the resurrection, after the crucifixion, there's resurrection.
Mm-hmm.
There's hope and there's glory. And just to connect those two, like just the normal reality of daily life and risen glory with Christ, they're right next to each other, and we just don't realize that. And that was just a defining moment for me on the trip too. Just to realize that, I mean, glory is never far away when we give ourselves to Christ.
I guess here's a question for people that can't say, like, they don't have money to go on these pilgrimages, but they really want to get that sort of experience. What can people do?
Trust in God. And if there's a real desire, to go, I really do believe God will put the people and the resources in life to make it happen. It might not be, this year or, next month, but if you put that petition before the Lord and you start talking, to people in your life, I mean, you'll get there.
Mm-hmm.
I know there's good people that will either help, sponsor or, I mean, the Lord just, he opens ways, especially for like a pilgrimage to the Holy Land too.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I kind of leave it at that.
Yeah. What about places that are, I don't know, just kind of near where you are? Like with us, it would be the Servants of Mary Center for Peace. Like, that's an extraordinary place,
Yeah.
For us, it's close, but people travel all around the world to see, that statue. So I also think, like, finding places near you can be an option as well.
Definitely. Yeah.
Or just going to cathedrals and, different churches.
Yeah. And that's a great point. I mean, you don't have to travel across the world literally to have a pilgrimage. I mean, look up, shrines in your local area, and without a doubt, you're going to find something within an hour.
Mm-hmm.
There's monasteries, there's, religious houses. I mean, there's places you can go. There's cathedrals and churches, basilicas. So you just gotta look it up and see what speaks to your heart and where the Lord's calling you to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that might be a good first step, especially if you haven't, traveled before. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What are some other places that have really spoken to you that you've gone to?
Yeah, I think I hit upon the main ones. I mean, I think it's Rome has a special place in my heart. And also, I mean, the Holy Land, particularly in Galilee. Jerusalem was kind of more like it was an ancient city, but it was just very busy and packed. There were a lot of cultures there. I really like Galilee. The Sea of Galilee is beautiful. One of the most beautiful places in the world, I think. And you can really see why God would send his son, the Father would send his son there to live and grow up for about 30 years. But Galilee just a wonderful place, and they're still uncovering ruins of different places. They just found what they believe is Magdala. So, Mary of Magdala.
Mm-hmm.
No one knew where Magdala was until about 10 years ago. And they found this village and like, we think this is Magdala. So it's still a work in progress. So I think if someone went 10 years ago or 20 years ago, they'd be surprised at everything new that is being unearthed and found there.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to think what else. I mean, yeah, like I said, Gethsemane would be another closer place in Kentucky. That's great to, kind of tag on to the beginning or end of a bourbon trail trip, which I've done before. Yeah, I think our cathedral is beautiful too here in Cleveland. If you haven't been to the cathedral, then that's worth, stopping up. There's saints relics. I mean, the beautiful artwork. So
when you say saints relics, like that is 100% true. Like there's a whole skeleton of a saint. It's in like this case. Apparently it was stolen one time.
Oh, was it really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, somebody told us. Whether that be true or not, I believe
It was
them.
on a retreat, so I would want to think that it was a true story.
Yeah, they said it was initially up by the altar and somebody just yoinked it and walked out the church.
Wow.
They got it back and now it's kind of locked away. So
Well, that's good. I don't know many use cases for a whole saint's bones and relics, so maybe the person didn't think that plan through.
I don't know, but it's there now. So yeah,
Well, that's good. Praise God. Glad he returned it.
Yes. Yeah.
What are some of your favorite things being a priest?
Yeah, I think I kind of hit upon these a little earlier, but I mean, I love celebrating Mass, preaching, confessions, and also spiritual direction too. I would say those are probably my top four. I mean, that's I don't know, anything sacramental, right? Anointing of the sick. I mean, just being with people in moments of need, being present with a family for the funeral, walking them through, and just spiritual direction, counseling people where they're at.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite things.
It's crazy that you say, being with a family during a funeral. Like, for me, obviously, that's just completely tragic. But for you to want to be there with them and like that be one of the most important things is really amazing. Yeah. And I will say too, I mean, there's a joy in being with a family like at a wedding, but there's also a very real joy, but also you're sharing in their sorrow too, with a funeral. And I mean, people are just so appreciative of just the small things that a priest or their parish will do for them, for a funeral. I mean, for instance, like we have a great bereavement ministry, both here and at St. Patrick's, that after the funeral, after the burial, they'll come back to the parish and have a nice meal. And the people in the bereavement ministry have all lost a loved one, so they've been there. They know, and so they're able to give back in that capacity too. So it's just it's just a wonderful way of reaching out to people, and that's what the church is. We're there for people at all stages of life and whatever their need is. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Are there things that shocked you about being a priest? Like things that you couldn't even have ever imagined? You're like, wow.
I was not prepared for this.
Yeah. We touched on all the pastor stuff, right? I mean, all the administration. But yeah, I think one thing that kind of just surprised me is just how busy it can be, how many things that you can do in a day, and also just how different each day can be. The seminary can be very structured. I don't have office hours. I'm not here 9 to 5, but I might be, not, I don't want to say working, but like doing ministry at various hours, maybe, being called, later at night or early in the morning to go, do an anointing for somebody in need. And I just think some of the surprises are that, like you're always on. And that can be that can seem daunting unless you realize it. And like, I'm on with Christ. Like I'm never called to not be with Christ or not to be in communion with him. So yeah, I think and probably like to put that surprise, like to flip it in a good sense, right? Like, it's a good thing to always be on with Christ. It doesn't mean you're not taking time for yourself. Like you said, you gotta take that time to rest, recreate, pray, spend time with family and friends. And one thing I realized too, like I need to keep my day off. I take Thursdays as my day off. So celebrating Mass, wrap up work in the office, I go home. I don't come back until Friday, late morning, early afternoon. I need that time with family and priest friends. It's rejuvenating. And so, I think just, taking time for yourself. But it takes some getting used to. Like you really have to be okay and comfortable saying, it's okay for me not to be here all the time. Doesn't mean I'm withdrawing my heart from ministry or from Christ. It's saying me and Christ are recreating. We're we're getting well. We're resting, and so that we can enter back in and do this for the long haul. Right.
Yeah, one thing that I like that you said was always on with Christ, and something that Father Pat Schultz was talking about that really stood out to me was that whether it's chastity or any sort of thing that you're dealing with, and of course chastity is always up at the top one for people thinking about, is like, why is it so hard? Like, can't you like bring it down here? That is not even doable. Like, how can you expect me to do that? And you're saying that, of course, is not, you can't do it. And that's why God's calling you to bring him into your life, to bring Jesus in, and to be on with Christ, and to be able to, that like gap that you're feeling in between you and that unattainable thing, that's like Jesus stretching out his hands, like pulling you towards that unattainable thing.
Right.
And I think that's super powerful about what you're talking about is you're always on, and it's difficult, but Jesus he's lifting you up too. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a beautiful way to say it too. I'm not saying I'm always on as a complaint or like, like feel bad for me. It's more like I'm always on, and that's a good thing. I have to realize that, especially as a priest, as a public person, I'm called to exemplify the person of Christ, and at all times. Do I do that perfectly? No. But we have a merciful God, and we have a God who is loving, who continues to use even our failures to help us to grow, to learn, and to mature in how he's calling us. Interesting story just along those lines too. When I was on retreat a couple of years ago, I had this experience. It was a 30-day Ignatian retreat. It was beautiful. It was difficult at times, right? 30 days of silence, and each day we had spiritual direction. But I remember like the first 3 days, like great growth, and I felt like I was just like flying with Christ. Like we were just moving forward, and then climbing the mountain, I hit a cliff, and I was stuck for another 2 or 3 days, and it felt like very frustrating. I'm like, I have another 25 days to go here, and I feel stuck. Like there's nothing more I can learn or do or grow. And I realized there was something in my heart I needed to surrender to God. I needed to give up that sense of control that I can do this on my own. And it's that moment when I said, okay, God, like I'm surrendered to you. I'm trying to hold on to, whatever it is I'm trying to hold on to, this relationship, my free time, making my priesthood about my thing rather than yours, whatever it might be. So that was the pattern of my retreats. So it happened like every 3 days, like I would hit another cliff. I'm like, okay, time to surrender something. And then the Lord, it's like that elevator of grace that St. Therese of Lisieux talks about. God brings you up in a way that you never could. You keep walking, you're going to hit that cliff again. That cliff, not to over spiritualize, right? What is that? That's a resistance in our heart. It's a place where we feel, I can't do what God's asking me to do. Chastity is a great example. Purity of heart, continence is other names for that too. We can't do that without God's help, right? It doesn't mean that we just have to, pray through things, but prayer is definitely a part of that. Our relationship with God, and letting God fulfill the aches in our hearts rather than trying to fulfill them ourselves. Huge lesson, and it's a blessing in our life when we can realize that.
I had a point that I wanted to make, but we kind of passed this topic already.
Let's go back.
You had a really good point. It's a lot better than the one that I'm about to bring up. It's just from a TikTok I saw, but it was like this one priest on TikTok. He's like, okay, this is the government hours, 9 to 5. This is bank hours, 9 to whatever, and this is hours, regular hours. And a priest, he like, it was the way he did it was funny, but they never get off, and he's just like using his arms to represent the a clock, and he's just wheeling away, but it was funny. Anyways, I just wanted
you
to
feel
bring
like that
up
sometimes. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say there's no struggles. I mean, there is,
Yeah, that's my point. We've kind of passed it now, but yeah.
Well, I want to go back anyways. We were talking earlier about like go talk to a priest, go ask these questions, bring these things to them, and help gain a better understanding of whether it's faith, thing that's going on in your life. Like priests know a ton about faith, but they also know about life because like there's just the human aspect to them that is formed throughout being a priest. And so one of the huge things that helped me, and I think almost everybody should be doing, is going to get spiritual direction. Maybe it's not fit for everybody at the moment, but if you're deepening your faith, it feels like a no-brainer. So yeah, what do you think about that?
Sure. So have you talked about spiritual direction before on the podcast?
We
Anyone brought that up?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I think first and foremost, start with everybody is meant to be a saint. So all of our listeners and viewers, you're called to be a saint, first and foremost. But secondly, that seems very daunting. So how do we get there?
Yeah.
How do we realize, like, first and foremost, like, how is God particularly, uniquely calling me to be a saint? He's not calling me to be another Mother Teresa or St. Francis of Assisi. He's calling me to be me, but in a completely sanctified way. We need help with that. So I think first and foremost, we need a stable prayer life. We need consistent and honest prayer. We need to show up to Mass on Sundays and holy days of obligation. That's forming us with the liturgy, the community of Christ, and especially with His Word and Eucharist. So we're not doing that alone. We are doing it with Christ, with the remedies and the incarnational realities that He's given to us as a church. And I think also, reading of Scripture, meditations, prayer, intercession, like all of that's important. You might be thinking, well, I'm doing all that, but what's next? And that might be a call to spiritual direction. What is spiritual direction, right? Spiritual direction, it's this relationship that you have with a director, and it does not need to be a priest. It can be anybody to help to guide that relationship closer to God. So what's the goal of spiritual direction? More intimacy, communion, and that union with God. Spiritual direction, it helps the person to deepen their faith. It asks the question, who is God to me, and who am I to God? How am I seeing God right now in my life? And how does God see me right now? And to be ready to embrace both the good, the bad, and the ugly in your heart with all of those questions. Because it's very possible that how we are looking at God, or how we think God looks at us, is a distortion, or there might be a lie there. And that might come from a wounded past, a history, something that somebody said to us, personally, maybe as a parent or a sibling or a authority figure, a priest. It could be, something that we've gone through in our life where it's distorted our image of the Father and His love for us. Or maybe we feel like, we're full of shame, or we're worthless, or we can't do what God's expecting of us. So I think to be ready to kind of embrace some of those questions and to come back with what we're going through. How does my relationship with God play into this? Which it's always part of prayer and growing in our faith. But sometimes we forget that. We think of prayer as maybe like I showed up. I did my prayers. Well, where's God in that? How is God looking at me in that moment? So spiritual direction can help to maybe untwist some of the distortion, to reorder some things in our life. It can help us to go deeper, and also can confirm us in the truth of the reality of who God is. I don't know. Spiritual direction, it's not counseling. There's definitely some overlaps, but counseling would look at trying to maybe focus on an issue or something I'm going through. Like, for instance, I'm sad, right? Well, why are you sad? What are the causes of your sadness? Let's talk about some remedies, and hopefully you'll be joyful, happy again. Spiritual direction might start there. Well, I'm sad. Okay. Well, let's look at the causes, the roots, and everything. Have you given that to God? How does your sadness play into your relationship with God? And what might God say to you about your sadness, and what is He calling you to? So it's interesting that, the director doesn't so much solve the directee's problems, but guides them to see the Lord in all things. So I wouldn't say spiritual direction's probably not for everyone, but I would say everyone who is seriously committed to that journey to be made more holy, to be a saint. Would be a good starting point.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that was one of the biggest things that I noticed and have been reflecting on recently is that when we started spiritual direction, I actually wasn't even coming for spiritual direction. I just kept scheduling a meeting
I
with
was gonna
you
bring this up.
to
Yeah.
just ask you random questions about the faith. And then you brought up like, hey, there's this actual thing that we can do, spiritual direction. And so it started out the very basic, like, what's this? Why is this happening? And like focusing on that stuff, and now moving into journaling, figuring out what God's doing in my life and how I'm reflecting and receiving those things.
Right.
And where does it go from there? Like, I'm at like entry level, beginner, intermediate, and then where do we get
Expert
to?
mode.
Yes, you're at level 3, I think. there's not like levels like that. But yeah, I think that the spiritual director, in my role as a spiritual director, like, I'm not trying to get you somewhere else. I'm trying to pay attention. I'm trying to listen to where the Lord wants to lead you. And you're trying to listen to that same voice. So to think about like this way, who is the spiritual director? The spiritual director is the Holy Spirit, always, not me. So if the director and the directee are both listening to God's voice, you're going to be drawn right where you need to go. I've had people say, Father, I'm good this week. I'm good this month. We don't need to meet. And it always strikes me kind of odd. I'm like, it's not the point. Like, spiritual direction isn't trying to solve a problem. And if there's no problems, then we don't need to meet.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, and this is a common experience, people will say, Father, at the end of the direction session, I had no idea what I was going to talk about today. But God led us right where we need to be. And that was immensely helpful.
Mm-hmm.
So it's God doing the leading in the direction, not the director trying to force conversion or, whatever that might look like. It's just paying attention to the promptings of the Spirit. And God speaks to my heart in spiritual direction too.
Mm-hmm.
Things that the directee will say to me, that influences me. I might bring up a memory or an experience, and I have to be mindful, am I meant to share this or not? Is this going to interfere with the directee's sharing?
Mm-hmm.
And listening to God if it becomes about my experience rather than the directee's experience.
Yes, good point. Not like projecting your experiences onto their experience, but being able to take it as a third party that, I don't know.
A coach for your soul. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, yeah, but it's like you're trying to view it through a very spiritual lens, but not through like your lens.
Exactly. It's seeing everything with God's eyes.
Mm,
And first
I
and
like that.
foremost, yeah. And so I just wrapped up there was a 3-year spiritual director program. We went 3 times a year for about a week with IPF, Institute for Priestly Formation, met out at Mundelein Seminary in just north of Chicago. And so for 3 years, we started the spiritual director training program. And I thought, from day one, we would just talk about like all the good tips and tricks, like, well, have you brought that to the Lord? And how do you think God feels about that? Like just learning like the right questions to ask.
Uh-huh.
The first year and a half was all about, it was focused on my own interior prayer life. And the point of that being, how can I help someone else in their relationship with Christ if I'm not close to him myself?
Yeah.
So if I understand the dynamics of the spiritual life, of spiritual consolation and desolation, wounds and ways that the Lord heals, how the Lord speaks, different experiences of life, like if I can be in tune with God in my heart, then I can be in tune with God when I'm meeting with another person and they're sharing their heart. So we did get to the tips and tricks, but it came in years 2 and 3, but we didn't like just bypass ourself in the process. We have to bring ourself, our humanity, our wounds and experiences into, we do this with every relationship, whether we realize it or not.
Mm-hmm.
So it's healthy. I mean, I'm so grateful I went through that program.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Yeah, otherwise it's kind of like the blind leading the blind.
It can
you
be.
know?
Yeah. Yeah. If you get, so I mentioned anybody can be a spiritual director, but you got to find someone who first and foremost is living the life that Christ has called them to, and someone who is disciplined in their life of prayer, who listens to the voice of the Lord in their own life, and is a good listener. You know, someone who's not going to interject and I don't know, try to lead the conversation or manipulate it or force an agenda on someone. There might be a place for, if someone's looking for like more of like a counseling or I need some direction itself, like tell me what to do. There's a place and time for that, but it might not be spiritual direction. So it really depends on what are you looking to increase your love and relationship with the Lord. Is this coming from a desire to be a saint? Maybe like vocational discernment as well. Like I'm not sure where God's calling me to a marriage or priesthood. Spiritual direction can really help in that capacity. And some people will do spiritual direction for the rest of their lives. Some people want to do it only for maybe a couple of months, kind of get grounded, and then I don't press that. I don't reach out to people if they don't set another appointment with me. I really trust that God has given them what they need.
Mm-hmm. Do you need any like formal training? You went through the 3-year program, but can I just be like, hey, I'm a spiritual director now?
Yeah, I mean, you should have some sort of credential, like, have you done this before? Do you pray?
Yeah.
So you might want to think about those things too. But yeah, people can be a spiritual director. There are other, I know John Carroll has a Spiritual Direction Institute. There's so many different ones you can travel to, here in across the continental United States. And just kind of talking about like, how do you become, a better spiritual director? And I mean, priests, deacons, religious sisters, lay men and women, they can all be spiritual directors. You just have to kind of know what you're going into. And there's good books as well, to read as well on spiritual direction. I know, I think it's Boniface Hicks has one just called Spiritual Direction. And so kind of lets you know, like, what is it? What is this all about? And it's a good read. Yeah.
Got it.
Are there questions that we haven't asked you, but we should be asking you?
Oh, I don't know. You tell me. You're the host.
Well, have we covered everything that you think you...
I think so. I mean, we talked about faith life, pastoring, spiritual direction. So I don't know. I mean, I'm content. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Shout out to Father Scott Goodfellow, pastor at St. Mary's and St.
Patrick's. We just celebrated his feast day.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, March 17th.
Cool. Well, thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.